So joining us now is a guest that I think you had on when I wasn't in once, baby.
No, I don't think Chris has been.
You've never been on before?
Sorry.
All right, so
I don't think he's been on with us before.
So joining us now is Chris Piehota, who is a former FBI special agent and was involved in IT and systems, involved in forensic lab operations, and did a lot of work in counterterrorism. So, Chris, welcome to the Conservative Voice on WWDB AM 860 in Philadelphia.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to visit with you and your audience today.
Yeah, glad to have you with us. So some of the things that we wanted to hit on that we sort of ran out of time in the first segment is first of all, the meltdown over ICE. Now, you did a lot of work in counterterrorism, right? And
that's correct.
When I look at what's going on here, we've got people being organized and sent out to go basically do battle with ICE.
I mean, except for the naked bike riders in Portland, and God, can we just never see that again?
Oh, that was hideous.
Horrifying. It's never the people you want to see naked.
No.
Naked.
That
ever.
popped up on my screen. I'm like, what world did I just lateral into?
Right.
So setting aside those folks, I mean, when you look at what's happening in this and you look at how organized and structured this resistance is, I mean, are these just people exercising their First Amendment rights, or do we see something more here, something designed to really undermine the nation, our structure, our culture, our system?
You see both, right? You see folks that are just, sympathetic to the plight of the migrant communities. But then there's also a more extreme leftist Marxist element that really wants to undermine and defeat our system of government, our society, and our social structures. And what you're seeing is those people are enlisting certain parts of the migrant community to now start, as they say, resisting. And they're teaching them tactics. They're getting them to attack ICE officers and other law enforcement. And these extreme left elements are organizing people in their view of the world to resist this tyranny, when they forget that these people are here breaking the laws of our nation.
Right.
So, I think you're starting to see it move toward more of an extreme position, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
You mean all of these people, they're not just here to be nice for the American dream? You mean they're going to cause violence? That's not possible. I've been reliably assured by the mainstream media that Antifa is just an idea and that these people are just protesting peacefully to make their voices heard. Are you saying that's not true?
I am saying that's not true, Ada. And the Antifa movement, as it's called, they are an organized group. They are a decentralized or distributed movement that operates under a unified set of ideologies and tactics. They're well-funded. They're organized. They have, you can say, ideological direction that they, offer to their, I guess you can say, followers and their subscribers, so to speak. But, they don't have a central leadership function. They are a leaderless resistance model, which confounds our legal system and our law enforcement approaches.
I would say if you look in the closet of Indivisible, you'll find a whole lot of information. I keep sharing this graphic for the No Kings protest we're going to see across the country tomorrow. And the sponsors are people like Freedom Socialist Party and other communist organizations. ACT UP. Like, there's just different isms involved. And the majority of the people going to these protests tomorrow won't have any idea about that, won't understand what the underlying focus or intent of all of this is.
Right.
No, that's one of the charms of the socialist / communist Marxist approach, is that they get people who are disaffected or disenfranchised. They give them slogans and jingles, and they give them these buzzwords that kind of rile them up emotionally. And that's why you see a lot of these folks out doing these so-called protests. And then when they're asked, well, why are you even here today? They don't even know why they're there. They're just there to act up and scream and yell and cause problems because they disagree with the current administration's policies. They have no idea why they're out there. And that's more of what you see with a lot of the younger, more liberal folks.
And the organizational structure that you just explained for Antifa sounds a lot like, I think, the organizational structure for something like Al-Qaeda.
Yes, ISIS.
Right?
Well, Al-Qaeda actually had a defined hierarchy of leadership, and so did other terrorist groups, because they're more paramilitary in fashion, right? So you have to have kind of a rank and order structure to give commands and make sure that they're doing things in a certain way with their resources, where this type of approach is more like that you'd see in the approach that was taken by Mao Zedong in China when the communists took over.
Ah, okay.
That's what
I've
you're seeing
included
here
that.
more so.
I've included that in some of my articles, that in particular, because he went after the students. And then as soon as he was done with what he needed from those students, where did he send those gullible little useful idiots? I say with love and kindness. He sent them to the fields to work, and that's where they were until most of them died.
Until they died.
The useful fools who pushed it.
Yeah, or until they said, hey, this isn't good stuff. This isn't what I signed up for. And then he had them eliminated.
Yep.
Right.
So, but that the approach is more similar to that
I agree.
than it is with your more, I hate to call it traditional Al-Qaeda, or your traditional, terrorist organization that does have an identified infrastructure. The other folks have those more leaderless resistance cells, so that, quite honestly, if you catch one cell, they don't know anybody in the other cells, so they can't give them up.
Yeah.
Right. Now, when you look at something like the No Kings protest that's planned for tomorrow, and you look at their website, nokings.com, whatever it is, they have locations all over the country.
Oh, yeah.
They have a website where you sign up and get organized. This is a pretty organized group. And if you look at what they're talking about, not only do they have this planned for tomorrow, but they have a follow-up call planned for Tuesday the 21st and a second one after that. And so they're not just talking about what they're doing now. They're talking about what they're doing next. They have another group that's recording, messaging, media, and digital engagement training. So they're training people to call talk shows. They're training people to get online. And I've noticed a big surge of very well-crafted or very similarly crafted messages, right, that has come up on social media in a bigger way than what I've seen lately. So this part of it is pretty well structured.
Yeah, they're maturing, right, as a movement. And I think what you'll see also is that as they mature, their tactics get refined, and they learn how to better operate in what I call the seams of our society.
Yep.
Places that we don't know what to do with yet under our current legal and social constructs. We're not sure how to manage this because of they'll say, this is my First Amendment right to air grievances. Okay.
Yeah.
But then that extreme kind of paramilitary part of that movement is out there, destroying property, intimidating, physical violence, things of that sort.
Right.
And you have to, and they disavow that openly, but that they don't mind it happening.
That's right. And they have some messaging that's reclaiming democracy, rejecting authoritarianism. Those are the people who also supported the entire nation being locked down. So how do you come out now and say, I reject authoritarianism and I want to reclaim democracy after you supported the lockdown of the whole nation on this virus hoax?
Right. Well, authoritarianism is always great when you're in charge.
That's right. And that's the way they like it.
And when you're not in charge, authoritarianism isn't that great. And that's what you're seeing now is they're painting the current administration as being tyrants, and they're accusing the current administration of all the things that they did during the last 4 years.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
And I wish the current administration was doing a little better job in managing public perception, doing that perception management. I think that they've been inconsistent with that. So I wish they would do a better job in telling people kind of what's really going on and what their intent is versus being fed whatever propaganda and nonsense by the mainstream media.
And one of the problems that we've obviously suffered in the United States and Europe as a whole, across all of, Ireland, England, Scotland, everywhere you go in Europe, Germany, it's the same. We've got people inside our power structure, elected officials, who are not operating in the interests of our people. And so many of us say, well, look, if you're going to throw it on the border for 4 years, you're going to let anybody come in, you're going to bring in fentanyl and kill 400,000 Americans, going to traffic hundreds of thousands of children, and you're going to let that happen. You're going to make sure the cartels have control of the border so that does happen. We consider that treason. But no one has ever been held to account for this. Now, this is a challenge for me because I'm looking at a nation that has a law enforcement infrastructure that is massive, between all the federal, state, and local agencies, with all of the prosecuting attorneys and the DOJ and its massive population. What is it, like 315,000 people? And yet no one has done this. But suddenly and finally, John Bolton is indicted over violating the Espionage Act. What are your thoughts on that? Have you taken a look at that?
I have, and I've been watching that develop. And I think where Mr. Bolton is concerned, he knowingly did some things that put him in this position. Okay, he transmitted those documents and that information over open internet channels. Yep. He shared it with his family members, and he decided to retain documentation according to the court documents. He retained documentation at his residence where he was no longer authorized to do so, because people don't realize he had a skiff built in his home when he was the national security advisor. That skiff was ultimately decommissioned and removed when he was, when he vacated that position.
Sure.
So he was no longer authorized to hold those documents and that information. So I think his actions brought these charges and this indictment, and I think we'll see it work its way through the court system. But he did certain things to arrive at this outcome.
Yeah.
But so, up to now, now, first of all, there's no chance he didn't understand that. Building a skiff in your house, that's no small thing. I talked to a guy that said if he was to work at home, he'd need a skiff. It would be $250,000. The government would have to install it and certify it and maintain it. He decided to just work at his office. So Bolton, he's got to be available 24/7 in one of his roles. Great, he gets a skiff. It's not like he didn't know what a skiff was or that these documents were something that he wasn't allowed to have.
You'll find that most times the senior people in our government are the ones who have the least regard for the classification authorities and requirements. I'll tell you, I was available 24 hours a day. I was actually an original classification authority in my last role with the FBI.
Uh-huh.
So, I understood all of that very well, and I did not have a skiff at my house, and I made sure that I didn't bring classified documents home to share with my family, right? And the fact that he was the national security advisor makes it even more egregious. But I will tell you that he came from, I think he was the UN ambassador, which again, he should have had very many counterintelligence defensive briefings.
Mm-hmm.
Also, he worked at the State Department, from what I see in his background.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, that there's a very, very notable culture of laxity at the State Department when it comes to classification. They see it as an obstacle, it's an impediment. And actually, one time when I was working with a State Department guy, he was assigned to our component when I was at the FBI. We were a counterterrorism component. And he was using his Gmail to send stuff. And I said, hey, you can't do that. And he goes, oh, we always do that at State. And I said, you don't hear. We don't use
we
our
always
Gmail
do that at
account,
State?
right?
And to be clear,
he said they do it all the time.
If this was a run-of-the-mill line agent, he was a field office guy doing this, he would be in prison right now. Like, they have prosecuted.
He'd be in big trouble.
Yeah, they have. I've seen prosecutions for less than what he was doing. So.
Yeah, but we've gotten to a point. I've heard this saying, and I think it was very well said, where when a general loses a war, there's no consequence. When a private loses a helmet, he's put in, he gets an Article 15 and he's in big trouble.
Yeah.
That's right? Not an exaggeration.
No.
And those helmets are not cheap, and they have to pay for them themselves.
Yeah, they make the private, he gets in big trouble. He gets non-judicial punishment, or maybe even get some formal punishment, but there's no consequence for the higher ups. And I think that's where the higher-ups aren't setting a standard, and they're not setting an example for everybody else on how to handle information that is key to the security and well-being of our nation. They kind of do it nonchalantly. And in this case, he wrote a book, and he wanted to use some of that information, and they feel entitled to that, which I completely do not understand, and I think it's unacceptable.
Well, he could have done exactly what everyone else who has written a book has done for eons before. You get the information declassified, you ask for permission to use it, you obtain the permission, you publish your book. It's really not that hard. So I'm going to shift gears real quick because you were talking about it's really hard to figure out what the DOJ is doing, or the administration is not necessarily communicating that way. And I found a perfect example to illustrate that. It's gotten very little news, very little fanfare, but the U.S. Attorney in California, with their Homelessness, Fraud, and Corruption Task Force, indicted Cody Holmes and Stephen Taylor, Shangri-La Industries, for essentially stealing millions of dollars from the California homeless programs that they were supposed to be saving homeless people with. You also have this week, we had an Antifa member. We had a radical arrested down south who had been a part of quote-unquote Antifa riots and protests at an ICE facility, who was charged this week federally. So you have to find it. The media is not reporting it. You have to actually follow the acting U.S. attorneys to get these news flashes. You need to get the emails to see what's going on. But there are ways that it does appear that they're going after the organizations who have been, taking all of this money illegally, I would say, from the government, and then using it personally. But also that brings a great deal of attention to the state governments giving these organizations that are corrupt all of this money in the first place.
Right.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing now is a return to the more of what we used to call the enterprise theory of investigation. You're not looking at nickel and dime type of business. You're looking to take out entire enterprise organization. You're trying to look at the systems and the processes that you can attack, not the individual actors. And you're seeing a little bit of a return to that approach. And I think you'll see that if the current FBI leadership can, kind of keep things tight and move forward smartly, that you're going to see them roll up some of these organizations that have been providing logistical or financial or just kind of facilitative support to these leftist organizations, the so-called non-existent Antifa and other people. And you're going to see the FBI is going to bring them to task. And then it's going to be important for the Department of Justice to bring good, strong prosecutions. You mentioned that one of these, two of these people in Antifa are being, they were indicted for material support to terrorism. This is going to be an important case because it's going to set precedent.
I love precedent.
Right?
Well,
and it's going to set precedent. And what they're going to be able to establish is, if we get these two guys and we build a solid case based upon our legal structure, then we're going to go get them all and destroy what's left of our legal system.
And if we don't do something this term, if we do not do something now, it will keep happening. It will grow larger and so large that we will not be able to control it. I don't think really people understand how close we are to losing this incredible experiment. You need to love it. You need to cherish it and take care of it and be a part of it. And we are really in a position right now where the entirety of our youth are being brought up to hate our nation, to hate our founding, to hate our country. So,
I'll tell you,
we're close.
Ada, I'll tell you, I grew up during the Cold War. A lot of folks don't even remember what that is. And I grew up when we had the Soviet boogeyman, around every corner.
Yeah.
And they worked against us for decades. They were very good at what they did from their demoralization campaigns. And the only problem, everything they put in place has worked splendidly.
Yeah.
The only problem is that they didn't survive long enough to see the fruits of their labor.
Right.
And these seeds were planted back in the 60s and the 50s and the 60s, 70s. They thought they would have us on our knees by the 80s. It's just taken longer for the division and the demoralization to happen. There's a great book that I always tell people to read. It's called The Naked Communist. and it lays out. This book was written in the 1950s, and it lays out completely what the plan was, how the communists would work against us.
Yeah.
And they had this long list of objectives that they've hit every one of them. If you read it, they've done every one of them. And one of those objectives was to destroy or defeat the FBI. They saw the FBI as their greatest threat and challenge. And I think over the past couple of years, we saw the FBI kind of take some odd turns. I hope that they're getting back on the right track to stand against this kind of leftist movement that's kind of rising up in the country.
Well, one thing about the Soviet Union, when they were trying to undermine the United States, they had one problem that they didn't have an outside source of constant revenue. The difference between them and the Chinese communists is that the Chinese figured out how to live off of Western European and American economies and use our own money to then fund the operations that they use to then undermine our nations. So it really is quite an insidious thing, but it's a bit like the Saudis, who have no economy unless they sell us oil. And so they're dependent upon us, but they use that then to do whatever it is the folks that are in control of the oil fields want to do. So the Soviet Union didn't have that pool of outside capital. The Chinese Communist Party does, right. And it's allowed them to prosper and do much more than the Soviets could.
Absolutely. The Chinese watched the Soviets fail, and they learned from it.
That's right. We've only got about...
And they've become...
Yeah.
Okay.
We've only got about a minute and a half left, and I just wanted to touch briefly because we wanted to get to this a bit earlier. But you did a book called Wanted: The FBI I Once Knew, and I just wanted to we got like a minute, if you could just tell us what is that about and why did you write that book?
Well, I wrote that book because I wanted people to remember what the FBI once was, and I came up under what I call the old breed of agents, who still were the G-men. We still had old guys who wore fedoras to the office. And they taught us how to be FBI agents. And I wanted people to know how I came up in the organization, how I learned to be an agent, where the FBI then went off track. As I kind of went through my career, I saw where we started departing from the leadership practices, the culture of the FBI, and the operational practices that made the FBI legendary. And we started, the leadership tried to start running the FBI as if it was Google or Netflix or one of those type of organizations, and destroyed the FBI culture and destroyed the leadership environment. And I wrote it in such a way not to be too critical of the organization, but critical of the leadership. And I was also wanting to tell people, here's how you get the FBI back on track. Based on my experience, you can get the FBI back. The American people want and deserve an FBI that they can depend on and trust. And I'll close with that part of the conversation with this. The FBI operates in a duality, right? On one side of a coin, they should be seen by our enemies as a snarling, vicious guard dog.
Yeah.
That they don't want anything to do with. But on the other side of that coin, the FBI should also be that same guard dog that you have no problem watching that dog lay on the floor and play with your kids. And you know for a fact that if anything comes to threaten those kids, that guard dog will defend those kids with its life.
I had a dog like that once.
That's the FBI that people want. Yeah, well, but that's the FBI that people want back, and that's what they deserve.
Well, let's hope we get it. And Chris Piehota, thank you for joining us on The Conservative Voice on WWDB AM 860 in Philadelphia. We'll be back in just a few minutes, everyone, with our second hour.